Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to this, which is the first in a series of interviews that we're running with writers who've achieved a name for themselves and who are all members of the Writers Guild. We're kicking off the series with Daniel Ward, a playwright who's been much in the news recently. I'd like to introduce Daniel and also our interviewer for today, broadcaster, writer, connoisseur of fine pastries, and of course, president of the Writers Guild, Sandi Toskvig. Over to you, Sandi.
Thank you so much. It's always slightly shocking when I'm introduced as the president of the Writers Guild. I have to say my younger self would be entirely astonished. But I am delighted to be kickstarting this is a new series of interviews with the Writers Guild writers, and how great that we're beginning with a young emerging writer. You know, I know for a lot of people writing is a very solitary experience, and I think all of us can gain great encouragement by hearing from others who are engaged in the same battle of pen and paper. Today we welcome Daniel Ward, a writer and an actor from South London. In 2019, Daniel's first play, The Canary and The Crow, premiered at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe in a production by Middle Child. It starred Daniel in a semi-autobiographical performance. The play follows a young black boy who's accepted into a prestigious grammar school, and as his two worlds are increasingly brought into conflict, the boy's struggle to know where he belongs is told through a mixture of live grime, hip hop, and classical music by Prez 1996 and James Frewer. I mean, I said that like I knew what I was talking about. I have no idea. Following immense popular and critical success in Edinburgh, the show embarked on a UK tour before playing at London's Arcola Theatre in early 2020. Along the way, it picked up 3 awards: the Brighton Fringe Award, the WGGB Best Play for Young Audiences Award, and the George Devine Award. Was also nominated for the Alfred Fagan Award. So, Daniel, let's start at the very beginning. Do you come from a theatrical family? Did everybody think as you were growing up, oh, look, there goes a young playwright?
No, absolutely not. I do not come from a theatrical family at all. My mum is a civil servant and always has been. Well, not always. She wasn't born a civil servant, but she has her first job since she was 17. And that's where she met my dad as well. He was also a civil servant. I just really liked writing and acting, but it did not come from my. It didn't come from. No. She was, you know, she was not best pleased. I was going down that path.
I understand that. I'm still appalled by what I
Yeah.
living, so I understand that completely. So, do you remember the moment? Do you remember a play? Do you remember something at school where you thought, actually, that's for me, that world right there?
I remember not liking too many things in school, and really and being pushed towards making a definitive decision about the rest of my life, and not really wanting to engage in anything apart from drama. But it wasn't an option at my school, so I left my school and I went to college to pursue drama, and then from there my drama teacher told me to go to the National Youth Theatre. So it was kind of like a steady progression. And when I was at the National Youth Theatre, they told me to apply for drama school, and I applied for drama school, and I was fortunate enough to get in. So it was kind of a steady progression that I was always walking towards, because it was what excited me, what engaged me, what I liked doing.
So are you a writer who acts, or are you an actor who writes, or do you not see it that way?
I don't really see it that way, because I think I will always write, and I think I will always act. Writing is a bit of a compulsion for me. Usually comes out of stuff that annoys me, and then I just get down and I'll just put it in a play or on the page. So I don't think I'll ever stop. Even if no one necessarily pays attention to what I'm writing, it's an outlet for me to express myself, and I really enjoy it. So I think I'm a bit.
You've got the right attitude, Daniel. You never write so that people will pay attention to you. I never think that's a good way forward. Did you have any heroes when you were starting out? Were there playwrights, for example, that you thought, if I could write a play as well as that person, that would be great?
Yeah, I think every single person that I have had the pleasure of working with, I've carried with me, and they have taught me new things and introduced me to new characters, new worlds, new ways of working, and new writers. So I was Roy Williams, Tanika Gupta, and then when I started watching plays and going to the theatre, I was blown away by Debbie Tucker Green, and then I went to I was in the Amen Corner at the National, and it was by James Baldwin, and I got the opportunity to read his works, which I hadn't previously, and yeah, it was unbelievable. I think when something is really good, it becomes, there's something that's quite magical that stays with you. So I think I've been fortunate to see not every production, obviously, but quite a few productions, and actually to have been involved in a few productions that have really helped define the way that I want to work. And yeah, Philip Osment, who the Canary and The Crow is dedicated to, was a huge influence on my work, and he was a fantastic playwright. So yeah, there's been loads, but generally it's been a journey of discovery. Every single time I meet somebody else, I discover something else, and that's been the joy. It's an ongoing process.
Canary and the Crow is your first play. Tell me about how the play came into being.
Yeah, sure. So I initially wrote it in 2000, and I think the first draft 2014, 2015. I get confused. But I initially wrote it because I thought there was something wrong. Something was annoying me. I saw lots of my friends that had been through the educational experience, black and brown friends who held trauma towards it. And it wasn't something that was discussed. It wasn't something that had, but so many people found it difficult to articulate. And the Canary and the Crow started as me trying to work out how that had happened, how so many people had this trauma through their educational experiences, and why.
So for anybody who hasn't Daniel, just tell us the basic premise of the play.
So the basic premise of the play is about a young black boy who gets accepted into a prestigious private grammar school. He's working class, and those two worlds collide, essentially. And it's about him trying to navigate those two worlds whilst trying to define himself as a young man growing up, not knowing, and seeing prejudices and discrimination from both sides, and also seeing how he should define himself, is essentially what the play is about. Yeah.
And tell me the process. So Middle Child are the producers, is that right?
Yeah.
At what point did the producers get involved? And also I'd love to know how the piece developed once it was in the rehearsal room.
Cool. So I'm fortunate enough to have known Middle Child Theatre since its inception. The founder, Paul Smith, was at drama school with me. And essentially what happened was I wrote The Canary and The Crow in 2015, 2014, like I said, sent it out everywhere. Everyone said, what is this? This doesn't make sense. Go away. And it kind of stood on my shelf for a while. And then Middle Child were doing an open submissions window, and we have a mutual friend via drama school who said, essentially, Daniel, you have to put this forward. And I was like, no. And it was like, do it. And I did. And then we did a R&D. And via the R&D, there were a few theatres that expressed interest. And when I redrafted it and asked Middle Child to send it on to those theatres, they then said to me, no, we would like to produce it ourselves. And I said, sure. The rehearsal process was interesting because, it was about not being precious, letting go and playing. and a lot changed. And yeah, it was a collaborative. It was started off by me, but the piece was a very much collaborative piece that embodied everybody's vision, and everybody had contributed a lot to it.
And was that difficult to say, actually, what I had on the page when I walked into this room is not perfect?
No, I'm quite. Yeah, a lot of writers, they don't like cuts. I love them. Just rip it off, man. Just get rid. If it doesn't work, get rid. I really I enjoy that process. I enjoy finding the shortest solution, working succinctly, and yeah. So I quite enjoyed that process. I enjoyed the challenge, and I enjoyed the interrogation of the work, because it was done. It was done in the right way, I guess. It was done with love. It was done with, you know, everyone working towards trying to make it the best piece of theatre it could have been. So,
how many characters have you played?
So what's interesting about the play is, in the production that we did, there are 4 characters, 4 actors, but the play itself, in the introduction, I say it's kind of like a concept album. There's essentially a main character called the bird, and then a chorus, which is the cage, and the chorus, as you would kind of think of in a Greek tragedy, has an unspecified amount of numbers, people. So it could be a 2-person play, it could be a 30-person play, but there are several characters in the play. It just depends on the way the production interprets it. So yeah, our one had a cast of 4, and I can't remember how many characters are in it in total.
And did the casting of those actors change the writing when you heard their voices? Because sometimes it's hard to make sure you differentiate all your characters in your head if you're just sitting by yourself in front of a computer.
The casting didn't change the characters. What I had to be very careful of in that room, having written it, was allowing people to make their own choices and make their own mistakes. So a lot of the time, people were deferring to me like, "What was that bit about?" I'm like, "What do you think it's about?" Yeah, I had to be really, obviously there's a time and a place to answer those questions definitively, but you also have to allow people to explore in a piece like this. So I was quite good at not answering, and ultimately, as actors do, they came up with fantastic choices that I couldn't have conceived if I tried to, define the characters in my head. So yeah, that was an interesting balance, an interesting process.
So now I've seen the Canary and the Crow described as gig theatre, but I don't even know what that means, darling. What is that?
Gig theatre. It's an interesting time. So the way that I describe it is, what is part of the makeup of middle child is what they do. It's what they define it. And the way I define it is, there are a lot of audiences, younger audiences in particular, who will go to a comedy gig or a music gig, but won't necessarily go to theatre. And it's about looking at what elements might attract a younger audience or a certain type of audience to a gig, a traditional gig, whatever way you want to define that, cabaret, whatever it is, that means that they wouldn't feel as welcome or wouldn't go into a theatrical space. And so it's looking at those elements and seeing if you can incorporate them into what is, a more traditional theatre format. So gig theatre is a really interesting space because it's constantly defining itself, and one person's gig theatre is not another person's gig theatre. So yeah, that's why. That's why.
Less traditional, so it doesn't have act 1, interval, act 2. Is it less the shape entirely up to the playwright?
I think it's entirely up to the playwright. It tends to be based in music, but I don't see that as necessarily being definitive. When there was another play in Edinburgh actually called Burgers by Travis Alabanza, and they said that when they came into the theatrical space, they came from a drag background and a cabaret background, and when they came into the theatrical space, there were a lot of conventions that they broke in their piece, and and what I intuit that is somebody taking those scenes, that gig, into a traditional theatrical space, and redefining those conventions. I think it could easily be one act, two act break, and I have seen it done that way. I've also seen somebody just playing drums constantly and talking about putting on socks. So it's a really interesting space. That was a Nabokov show.
So let's talk about the music, darling. Tell me about Prez 96 and James Frewer, which I said as if I knew what I was talking about.
Oh, you did great, man. They're geniuses. They are incredible. So Prez 96, he also played Snipes in the play. He came on and he produced all the beats and all the. Let me roll it back a little bit. So one of the parts of the Canary and the Crow which was most interesting was the music, and it was the clash of the two different sounds. So the sound of the grammar school was embodied by two cellists, who, yeah, well, it's a wonderful instrument, beautiful, when they were playing some fantastic music. And then the sound of kind of the Birds' youth was grime, and kind of more urban music, and it was about fusing those two sounds, fusing those two genres, but also it was a device to tell story. At certain points, the more urban sound would take precedence. At certain other points, the more classical sound would take precedence, and those were deliberate choices because they were part of the storytelling.
By you, the
By the ensemble, but it was based on an understanding that the music was another character. Essentially, there was no arbitrary music in it. The music was a character and it existed for a reason. So yeah, it was, and then yeah, just music, fusing those two sounds together and making different tracks, making them more harmonious at certain points, making them more combative at certain points as well, was another element of the Canary and the Crow. It was really cool.
This is described as semi-autobiographical. So how much of the story stems from, I mean, what's the semi part? That's what I'm asking you. Really.
Oh, I love this question. I love it. Well, it's essentially a true story. Essentially, I myself went to, I didn't go to a private grammar school, I went to a grammar school. I think there were 6 black boys in my year. And in the Birds, I think there's 2. The reason I call it semi-autobiographical is essentially it's just dramatic license. It's allowing me to heighten certain bits. It's allowing me to explore, because once I've got the story, not all of it's going to be interesting. We don't need to explore year 5 PE, whatever it is. So it's about heightening certain bits and making it into a good story, essentially. And also, a lot of the stuff that happened in the play occurred over the course of a lifetime. A lot of my experiences that I talk about in the play happened to me at university as well. So it's about condensing those experiences into my school, because that's when the play's set. So it's semi-autobiographical in that some of the characters are an amalgam of people. Some of the stories are a bit of a mashup, but essentially it's pretty much all true.
But is it a worry that you'll have to keep having to mine your own life for material? I mean, it's always a concern. I think the writers need to have an interesting life in order to keep going.
No. I think what's useful about it is that often when you're starting out, writers are often asked about finding their own voice and finding a unique voice. And there's something about intuiting a lived experience that inherently helps you find your own voice. But I think once you've done that and you found your own voice, you can do whatever you want. I mean, I could go back and talk about the messy teenage years, but I'm not, that's not on the cards at the moment. And also, yeah, like I said, I said to you before, a lot of stuff, writing is a compulsion for me. So there'll be something that triggers me that will draw me to write a story. Yeah.
So last year, the play won the Writers Guild Award for Best Play for Young Audiences.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering what the reaction of young people are. Are you managing to attract people to the theatre who wouldn't normally go?
Yeah. I think that was part of the makeup of the show, and particularly this production. It was about inviting people into a space and then allowing them to engage in whatever way they so wished. And sometimes that was quite destructive, but then you went with it. There was one particular, so we got a lot of music in the show, and there was one particular time that the show was on where we were playing and we heard something sounded off, and there was an audience member who was playing a flute, who brought in and was just like playing along, and so we had to kind of go with that, because it's about not denying people to do that, but then also having to ride it, and yeah, get it back to the story. And
yeah, I wouldn't bring a flute.
Yeah,
I wouldn't do that.
Yeah. I don't have I don't know how he got it in. I found out afterwards. I was like, that's what it was. It was somebody playing the flute, and then I so politely told him to stop playing.
Let's just talk a little bit about this year, Daniel. So at the beginning of the year, the Canary and the Crow was playing in the main house at London's Arcola Theatre.
Yeah.
Then all the theatre closed down. How have you been weathering the rest of the year? Have you been feeling like some writers under tremendous pressure that you're supposed to be being incredibly creative during this time?
Oh yeah. But I ignored it. Initially, straight away. Like, and also I'm aware everyone is going to deal with the situation differently. But for me, I had a lot of people asking me about stuff straight away as soon as lockdown happened and the way I felt, and I hadn't had time to form any kind of opinion. It just started, and I didn't know, so I kind of done anything but write initially, or not engage with that narrative. I did a bit of baking, did a bit of gardening. I went in and helped my mum with a lot of stuff that she has been pestering me about for many years around the house. But then eventually I think it was about 2 months or 3 months in, I started to write little bits here and there. But I didn't put any pressure on myself to have anything definitive or great or coming out of lockdown, because it wouldn't have worked for me. I think the way, yeah.
You must be under pressure because when you win lots of awards, which you did for the Canary and the Crow, then everybody's looking at you going, oh, what can you do now? It's almost more pressure than writing your first piece, isn't it, to have to write the follow-up to an award-winning play?
Yeah, maybe. I don't really, yeah, maybe. I think I don't really think of it like that, simply because stuff just keeps annoying me. So if stuff keeps on annoying me, I'm going to keep on writing about it.
Do you
Like
think
I
Shakespeare
don't think,
came in one day and went, "Oh, I'm so annoyed about this one thing, so I'm going to write a play." I love
yeah,
starting. Your starting point for writing is annoyance. I think that's
yeah, it is though. It is though. It really is because it drives me. But it's I say that flippantly, but it's stuff that is often often personal and often I say annoyance, but it's more than that. It's like I need to tell this story for a reason. There's a definitive why in terms of any story that I want to tell. Otherwise, I can't really tell it. That makes sense. I can't start a story without having a definitive why. And so, but yeah, that definitive why is often based in stuff that's gone wrong in the world or stuff that I feel needs to be addressed.
Um, 2020 thing, the global phenomenon was, of course, the Black Lives Matter movement, and it's so important we look at the historical and contemporary experiences of Black people. Do you feel a pressure as well to represent Black people in the theatre?
No, I don't feel a pressure. I feel that's what I'm passionate about. So it's never really a pressure. I'm passionate about telling stories that center the lived experience of Black people and Black British people, and allowing those stories to be authentic and occupy the space they deserve. What's interesting is that I wrote this play obviously a long time ago, and it's won lots of awards and it's done very well. But because it was prior to the Black Lives Matter movement, because it already existed, there have been a lot of people who've wanted to engage with me because I'd already started a discourse about, potential kind of institutional racism in society and Black trauma. And I'd already wanted to start that discourse, and I'd already started that discourse with Canary and The Crow. So there were lots of people who wanted to talk to me about ways in which maybe their organizations or personally they could, be better. So that's been an interesting thing to navigate. But essentially, I always want to write stories that I'm passionate about, and I'm passionate about Black stories. So kind of goes hand in hand, really.
Now, you won the George Devine Award, and previous winners, I mean, extraordinary list of people: Mike Leigh and Lucy Preble, Laura Wade, Hanif Qureshi, and so on. Where do you hope that the award will take you next? Where would you see? What would be the dream in sort of 10 years' time? Where you would see yourself?
I don't know. I really don't know. Like I don't I don't think long term like that. I just kind of feel like the next dream is the next project. I kind of put my all into the thing that I'm trying to realize next, and then see where that will take me. And I've been fortunate, obviously, like I've won the award, and so lots of people have kind of wanted to talk to me about stuff and engage with me about future projects and stuff. And so, yeah, there's lots of stuff that I'm really passionate about, and I'm really interested in telling stories. I'm interested in telling that I'm having the opportunity to explore presently. So, but 10 years time, I don't know. I'd like to be a better baker. There you go. Because I was not good over lockdown.
You can be president of the Writers Guild, darling. I'll be done by then.
No, thank you. You're good. You're good. You're good.
What advice would you give to playwrights starting out in the industry?
Just trust your gut and go with what you're passionate about and tell a story that you would like to hear. I think sometimes there's so much information people forget, and so many incredible writers and so many incredible stories that people forget to engage in a story that they themselves would like to hear. If you make yourself your first audience member, as it were, it will always give you an insight into what will make your story unique. That's what I'd say.
It has been such a pleasure talking to you, Daniel. I really, really enjoyed it. It's been.
Oh, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you too.
Will you please invite me to your next play?
Yes, 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 of course, of course, of course, of course.
Don't ask me to sing
100%.
song. The grind. Can I just say to the membership, if you have been struggling to write at this uncertain time, I really would want to say try not to let that build up in some kind of barrier which you think can't be breached. You know, if you've had a barren time of creativity, the only thing you can try and do is put it behind you. As it happens, today marks the birth of the Roman poet Perseus, 2,000 years ago, and he wrote, "We consume our tomorrows, fretting about our yesterdays." Be inspired by others and be proud to call yourself a writer. It is the noblest of professions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Sandi, very much. Daniel, I hope that you get plenty of other issues to make you as angry that you end up producing something as good as The Canary and the Crow once more. And everyone else, thanks for coming today. We look forward to welcoming you to our next Zoom discussion at 5 o'clock next Thursday, which will be exploring Can You Make a Living Writing Children's Television? And we will send out a link to all of you. Thank you all for now. And if any of you would like to involve yourselves with the Guild or even join us, you're very welcome to do so. Please contact us via our website. We welcome everyone in writing, from theatre, television, film, radio, publishing and video games. And you don't have to be a professional writer to join the Writers Guild. We take everyone, students, emerging writers, people changing career. So we hope to hear from you. All the best. Bye-bye.